Okay, everyone, welcome. This is our third talk of the day in this beta room. Our third talker is going to be from quick wins to advanced ARIA patterns, making React and Volto UI components accessible. And the talker is going to be Katrin Zaks. Can I get applause for Katrin? Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I want to talk to you about the topics that we hear a lot lately, but my more general talk is on Friday. Today I want to share with you practical examples in coding, how you can improve your React, for example, components, and that's how you can improve the accessibility of your web pages. First of all, I have a question for you. Who is developing already with accessibility in mind? Yay! So I would be very happy to hear also your thoughts after the presentation in discussion part. But yeah, let's start then. And I would like to start with that I really love this term and that it has its meaning in itself already. And it means that you don't need to create something new, but rather to remove everything or barriers that we already have. And we have many examples of it in the real life, but let's start from who am I? Hi again, my name is Katrin and I was born in Kazakhstan, then I moved to Israel and now I work and live in Germany and I work as front-end developer in Interactive. And 2 years ago, I had no idea what Plone and Volto is. Now it's part of my daily routine. And in order to stay mentally sane, I love gardening. And also I learn about accessibility. And I found this topic very important and very interesting. And that's why I also love to share my passion about it with you. And so as I mentioned, we know many examples about accessibility in the real world. For example, these yellow passes for blind people, traffic lights that tell you when you can cross the road, and ramps, and etc. But what is it actually in the browser? So we all know HTML, we all can write it. And in very, very general terms, it creates a DOM tree that you see visually in your browser. But at the same time, is something else created. And this something else is called accessibility tree. And this accessibility tree is very important for assistive technologies. For example, like screen readers. So, okay, we learned about it a little bit. Now let's see a better example. For example, here is a code of very simple web page. It has only navigation and main part, and you can see in the schema how it is presented in accessibility tree. So you can see there are some differences. For example, in accessibility tree, you will not find some div elements because they have no reason to be presented in accessibility tree. And let's have a look at just one HTML element. So for example, button. And you can see that it has row and it has name, and it might also have very different other characteristics. For example, focusable, expandable, etc. So now I would like to show you also how you can find it in your browser. I really hope it works. Yeah. So when you go to your Chrome DevTools, you can see a really small accessibility icon on the right, and then you see your accessibility tree of your web page, and you can inspect it, and it's very helpful for debugging sometimes. And we know that there exist many tags that we use in HTML, and I have good news for you. If you use them, then you already develop in accessible way. But sometimes we all have designers. We need to work with designers who come to us and ask for more complicated widgets. And HTML is already not really enough. So here we have ARIA that comes into scene. And also in very, very general and simple words, it's kind of guidelines with the help of which you can rewrite rows of some HTML elements. And you can see that there are many different rows that you can use and create more difficult widgets. So let's have an example. You want to create a button, and you can do it with a div, because why not? And in the beginning, you can see that in accessibility tree, you see it doesn't really have row and it doesn't really have name. So it's not clear what it is. So, okay, you can add row button, for example. And then you can see that it has now row button and it also understands the name of this element. But is it enough? Because it's kind of the same if you see the bicycle and you say, okay, now it's called car. But it doesn't help you, because like in order for it to be a car, it needs to have engine at least, and also many other things. So for this div to be a button, it needs to have a lot of code. So why to do it if you can do it only using HTML tag button? So that's why even ARIA has its own first rule that you should use semantic HTML as much as possible, and only in some edge cases you can use ARIA. And when you decide, okay, yeah, I have an edge case and I need to use ARIA, then there are many patterns, WCAG patterns, which you need to inspect and to understand how you can, in the right way, implement this widget. Because you need to take full responsibility for all behaviors that this widget is going to have. So what we've learned already, we've learned that we need to use semantic HTML as a first. When we can't use fully semantic HTML, we can use ARIA. But when we decide that we use ARIA, then we take full responsibility for implementing it accordingly. Now let's have a look at some elements that we use a lot on our web pages and how we can actually improve them. So who thinks that this icon button is accessible? Actually, it is, because you can see that it has row button, it has text, and it has icon, which is actually ARIA hidden, which means that assistive technologies are not going to try to read SVG and so on. But what happens when we have, it was a labeled icon button, but what happens when we don't have label? So this one is already an example of not accessible icon button, because it has no text. You see that it has row button, but no name. And what, for example, a user that uses screen reader really sees, hears, only button, but he has no idea what it does. And how we can improve it? We can use ARIA label. I think many of us already know this technique. And then everything is fine, it has name. But it's not the best solution in case of internationalization. For example, if you have internationalization on your website, then it's going to be fine. But if you don't, and users use browser translations, the same happens with screen readers. And sometimes some screen readers don't translate ARIA label. So a better approach is to use just usual text with visually hidden technique. So it means that you create a visually hidden CSS snippet, and you kind of put away or hide your text from visual UI, but it stays in the accessibility tree. And we all love reuse components in React. That's why you can create just a wrapper component, so to speak, and reuse it on your website. So what we've learned that with ARIA hidden, you can hide elements from accessibility tree, and with visually hidden technique, you can hide vice versa elements from visual UI. What happens? Let's talk about outline state. So sometimes designers come to us and say, I don't like the default color of outline of browser. let's remove it. So that's the point where you need to say, no, let's find another way to deal with it. Because many of us just put outline none and that's it. A better approach would be to add, for example, border or somehow to implement another technique in order for user to see where he is, because user that uses a keyboard, he is not going to see where he is at that moment on the web page. If designer wants just another color, you can change the color of outline. And you can find also a compromise. When designer, for example, says, no, I don't like outline, you can use focus visible. It means that when user clicks with mouse, he is not going to see this outline, but when he comes with a keyboard, he is going to see it. Another element that we use a lot in our web applications is text input. We have it a lot in our formulas and everything. So this is an example from semantic UI library that Volto for now is using, and I am very happy about the time when it is going to be away from Volto. And you see that the default state is that it has placeholder. So on the right side, it is what hears user who uses screen reader. So he has no idea what this text input is about, because screen readers don't see placeholders. And thanks to someone who developed form field dropper in Volto, because it was great, it has label. And it was also important not only to add label, but also to connect it with the input using ID and HTML4. And also, if you want to add more information, you can also add it as text and then connect it with ARIA described by, again, using ID. And if designer says, okay, I am against labels, we still can find a compromise, and we can use what I've mentioned already, this visually hidden technique. We can use it, we can make it more generic, and then we can use it for labels. And for example, then user is going to see placeholder with good contrast, but the user that uses screen reader, he's going to hear label. And I mentioned already that we connect elements using IDs on our web page. That's why if you are saying that you are not so creative to create many IDs on your web page, you can use ID hook from React. And now let's talk about error handling. So sometimes also we are told that designer, for example, doesn't like a pop-up, default browser pop-up. So in most cases, it means that we can't use required on the input. So, okay, what instead we can use? We can use icon that tells the user that this field is required. The best approach is also to use text and to also to put it or into label or into description, or like also hide it visually so that people who use screen readers, that they can hear it. And after that, when, for example, you have an error, there is a technique, a triangle technique. So just remember that it's never enough to use only colors, because a person who doesn't understand color, he is not going to understand what happened here. And the triangle technique means that you use, first of all, color. Second of all, you use some kind of icon, something that tells that, look, here is the error. So for example, here is its exclamation mark, and we all know that it means that something went wrong. And the third part is text. So you have to tell to user what went wrong, or at least where. So which input had a problem. And a good news also is that you can connect error text with your input, also using ARIA described by, because it can accept many IDs. So what we've learned how to validate input fields in an accessible way, how we can add descriptions and errors using ARIA, and how to combine visual and semantic cues. Now let's talk about more complicated widgets. So what if we can't implement some widgets using our HTML? And thankfully, as I mentioned already, WCHG has many patterns that you can use in order to implement your widgets. And of course, it takes time, but the good news is if you implement it once, you can reuse it in your whole project and also in your all projects. So for example, let's have a look at combo box. I hope that internet works here. So at first look, it is a lot of text. And of course, when you have time, it would be good to understand why this widget should actually work as it is. But the main point is to find what widget you actually need. So for example, you see there are many examples already, so you kind of read it and understand what of them you want to implement. So let's say we want to select only combo box. And a great part, which I really love, is that it already has code there. So when you open it in CodePen, it has a JavaScript code on all keyboard navigations that you really need. And in my case, I, for example, work with React and I understand React better. That's why I just take it and ask ChatGPT to translate it to React. And then I can understand what I really need and maybe what I don't. Here at the bottom, you can see all areas that you need to implement in order for this widget to work as it should work. And it also has descriptions, which is also kind of good. And here is a bunch of text that is connected to keyboard. So I also have kind of a technique usually to implement it. So you need just to divide them into groups, because when you see, let's say the first group is navigation group. It means all the keys that you use in order to go between your items. And usually it's down arrow, up arrow, alt plus down arrow, home and end. And you can see that it does the same thing. So open the list box if it's not already displayed, and or it moves focus or it doesn't move focus, but the main point is the same. So that's how you can group it and already implement logic only for them. After that, you have usually some operational keys, let's say. It means enter, space, such keys that when you press them, something happens. And usually in this case, for example, in list box, it means that it sets the value to the item list and closes the list box. And you can also group them and implement the logic for them. And usually there is almost always escape key, which just almost cancels everything. And tab, there are two options: or it should work as it works, or it should does some logic that you also need to implement separately. And also, there is one more thing which you need to know about focus traps. So mostly it is connected to all modals and pop-ups. And what it means that, for example, when you open your model, you need to do so that focus stays in the model no matter what. So here, for example, models, according to the patterns, they don't have a huge keyboard navigation implementation, so it's kind of easy to implement. But what is important, it is to track where your first and last element, focusable element, for example, is. For that, we built, for example, in our project, a custom hook, and we reuse it in all our pop-ups and model. And yeah, so you don't let user to go outside from this model, because just imagine that you can see and then suddenly you were just in the model and suddenly you are on the next element. So it's kind of confusing. And I would like also to show you some testing tools that I really love. So first of them is, of course, XDev tool. You can add it as an extension in your browser, and it's really, really easy to use. You can just do full page scan, and it's going to tell you to list you problems that your page has. it finds, I would say, 60% of the problems. And the great thing is that it tells you what the problem is and also where to find it. So, for example, if you go here, it shows you where this element is. Another tool, like similar a little bit, is Lighthouse, but I use it personally less. And for contrast, because like automated tools, they can tell you like about some contrast problems, but not all of them. So I personally use color contrast analyzer, and here you can like choose the, for example, foreground and then background, and then it's going also to tell you if it fails or not. And it is also very useful because we need, unfortunately, especially if it wasn't checked during the design phase of your project, then you need to check like text according to the background of button, then background of button according to borders, then borders according to the background of the page. So it's kind of a lot of work, but it should be done once before you implement all hover, focus effects, and etc. So yeah, what I would like to mention in the end, that the main point is not like to be afraid of accessibility and think that, oh, my web page is not accessible, I'm not going to, like, there is no point to do anything with it already, or like to try to reach some ideal state, because there is no end, to be honest. We always just need to improve our websites, to talk to users, try to understand how they use it, what they prefer to do, and so on, and try to improve our applications. And I'm very excited about Plone 7. Unfortunately, it's going to be only in 2 years from now, but still. And I'm looking forward to it. We are really looking forward to it, to have more accessible elements, not only on the user page, let's say, but also for editors. And yeah, thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I have one question. Is about what you mentioned regarding translation. I don't get exactly why it's a problem using an ARIA label there instead of having some text in the actual DOM, which is visually hidden. I'm not. Can you come back to that?
Yeah. So in general, when you use internationalizations, then you just translate everything in our. We translate everything in our apps. But when we, for example, don't, then users, they use browser translations. And sometimes, and the same happens with screen reader. So they use translations that is built into screen reader. And sometimes not all of them translate ARIA labels in a good way. So it would be better to use text as much as possible so that it could translate it.
This I get. What I don't get is why we cannot use the translation system.
No, you can.
Also to the ARIA label.
No, you can. It's more if you don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. Do you know any tool to automatize when we want to check the contrast in components? Because it's very hard to check it always, no? If the button, for example, it's one color and the border and all these kind of components, the contrast it's good. Do you know if are there any tool to automatize this, or do we need to check it manual with this tool that you show in that?
Yes, so as I mentioned, XDev tool, it also finds contrast problems when it has, but sometimes it doesn't see, for example, it can see focus or hover effect, because you need it runs on everything that you have right now on the page. So for example, hover, it's not going to see. So you need to check it manually with some other tool. And Unfortunately, what I forgot to mention also about keyboard navigation, unfortunately, at least I personally don't know any tools that you can use in order to check it, like, except for manually going through all elements.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Can we have one more applause for